good, y'all? Welcome back to the Onyx Report, Black Masculinist news for the day. Thought I'd get in a quick hit tonight and share a piece that I ran across a little while ago. I hope everybody's well. Shout out to I'm Listening, Jay Cleveland. What's up? Hybrid Ninja. Good to have y'all in here. Yeah. Like I said, this actually, let me see. What's up, Ishmael? Ragnar, what's up? Yeah, this is a piece I want to share with you. Actually comes off the Washington Post, and it's written by Andrew Yang, who ran for mayor a while back in New York, Democrat turned independent. But he shares an interesting piece. Now, he doesn't deal with race in the piece, and it's interesting to kind of reflect on it from that vantage point. But I thought I'd just share it with you real quick because I thought it gave us some pretty good food for thought. So here we go. And I should say, like, share, subscribe, join, and donate. Support the channel if you will. It would be much appreciated. And get out of YouTube's shadow ban. So help me do so if you would. Arta Ibmore, what's up, man? Powerful stream earlier today. Highly contentious, but you handled it. So, shout out to you, man. Anyway, this piece, as you can see, is entitled Opinion. The data are clear. The boys are not all right. Right. This was written February 8th of this year. It says Yang is founder of the Forward Party and a former candidate for New York mayor and U.S. president. Yeah. What's up, Kiel? What's going on? Vondi, what's up? So anyway, here it goes. Here's one of the biggest problems facing America. Boys and men across all regions and ethnic groups have been failing, both absolutely and relatively. For years. This is catastrophic for our country. The data are clear. Boys are more than twice as likely as girls to be diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, are 5 times as likely to spend time in juvenile detention, and are less likely to finish high school. Unfortunately, it doesn't get better when boys become adults. Men now make up only 40.5% of college students. Male community college enrollment declined by 14.7% in 2020 alone, compared with 6.8% for women. Median wages for men have declined since 1990 in real terms. Roughly 1/3 of men are either unemployed or out of the workforce. More U.S. men ages 18 to 34 are now living with their parents than with romantic partners. Now, this is definitely something I've been seeing with students over the years. And truthfully, I'm seeing this happen to some extent at younger and younger ages. Young men in particular, just pulling out, stepping back. Shout out to Arta Vidmore for the Cash App. Appreciate that. Kay, appreciate that support. Yeah, that's what we're looking at. Now, again, this is happening across race. And that being said, we also know that the numbers for Black males tend to be worse. So everything we come across here, we're just going to have to compound that for Black males. Nevertheless, this is a very consistent factor across the board. I was even talking to BGS earlier today. We were laughing. We got on the subject of young boys and the push for sex, and we were laughing about how when we were young, even though he's boomer and I'm Gen X, we were out there. I mean, in 8th grade, I was looking for girls to try and have some kind of engagement with, but I noticed a lot of young men these days, very different outlook. There's a definite stepping back that I've noticed with boys in particular, that has caught me off guard. All right. So continuing, economic transformation has been a big contributor. More than 2/3 of manufacturing workers are men. The sector has lost more than 5 million jobs since 2000. That's a lot of unemployed men. Not just coincidentally, deaths of despair, those caused by suicide, overdose, and alcoholism, have surged to unprecedented levels among middle-aged men over the past 20 years. Now, I just read an article the other day on my show highlighting how, again, Black males, right, their suicide rates have gone through the roof in comparison to other groups. They are the highest in that regard in terms of the vulnerability to suicide. And it's understandable why, right? Because in the midst of having social expectations of manhood placed upon you, Black males find themselves the least accessible, or having the least amount of access to be able to meet those socially accepted demands, right? Which produces, in many instances, a severe depression, and especially when people want to tell you that those barriers to your access don't exist at all. They're all in your head. They're all a product of your own personal failure or weakness, so on and so forth. And this is the problem with trying to characterize structural issues with independent or individual based narratives. It doesn't work. I think that's Deanie. Appreciate that support. A few more people coming in the chat. What's up, fellas? Essential entities. What's going on? All right. So, research shows that one significant factor women look for in a partner is a steady job. As men's unemployment rises, their romantic prospects decline. Unsurprisingly, according to a Pew Research Center analysis of data from 1960 to 2010, the proportion of adults with a college degree who marry plummeted from just over 70% to roughly 45%. That's real. That's real. Yeah. Many boys are thus often growing up raised by single mothers. The share more than doubling between 1980 and 2019 from 18% to 40%. And again, these are numbers across the board, right? Because we know in the Black community, those numbers are actually much higher as far as single motherhood or boys or children born to single mothers, much higher. A study from 2015 found that as more boys grow up without their father in the home, and as women are viewed as the more stable achievers, boys and girls alike may come to see males as having a lower achievement orientation. College becomes something that many girls, but only some boys, do. Now, in my show last night, my long weekly live, I shared a study that was conducted some years ago. And it was something that Marcus Aurelius was suggesting we put on the screen. And I'm going to do it again in response to this line, because I think it's important. It raises a component that Yang here is not talking about directly. So he's saying in particular that, boys are just kind of not, they're being raised by single mothers. They're kind of pulling out. They're not going to college. But he's not necessarily making the connection between parental roles and boys' confidence, right? He does say that they grow up without a father. He kind of implies it. And then he says there's this kind of emphasis on girls to be viewed as more stable and more high achieving, but he doesn't make the connection. So why don't we do it for him? Let's see. All right. So as you can see, I'll make it full screen for you. This is an interesting study that does that very thing, right? Mothers' academic gender stereotypes and education-related beliefs about sons and daughters in African-American families. Right? This was put forth in 2009. And the crux of it, this is a study performed with 334 mothers, right, of 7th and 8th graders. As consistent with hypotheses, mothers held less favorable expectations for sons and perceived sons to be less academically competent than daughters. In addition, mothers reported stereotypes favoring girls over boys in academic domains. Stereotype endorsement, in turn, was related to mothers' educational expectations for and beliefs about the academic competence of their own children, even with the youth's actual achievement controlled. Right? Negative stereotypes about the academic abilities of African American boys may create a negative feedback loop, thereby contributing to the maintenance of the gender gap in African Americans' educational outcomes. All right. So, what does all of that mean? It means that the degree to which mothers have confidence in Black boys directly impacts them, and the degree to which they don't directly impacts them. The expectations that boys are just less capable in school than girls, even in the face of high academic achievement, right? So when you control for that, it simply means that even when boys are doing considerably better, Black mothers in particular, tend to not see it and tend to still lean on their daughters as their choice for the one in the household to be academically inclined. So Yang kind of skips over this piece, doesn't really make that connection. But in Black communities and Black households, this is significant. This is significant altogether. You know, it has a direct impact on boys' performance. And a lot of people may want to downplay that, but it's important that we acknowledge it. Because at the end of the day, this directly has an impact on everything from, college to, and even when you're talking about math and science, because we've talked about this for a while now, right? When it comes to Black boys on a national level, we know that it's about 10% that are literate by 8th grade. It's about 12% in math and science that are competent by 8th grade. Even if you want to go into the trades, you still have to have a strong understanding of math. You still need to know how to read. You still have to have a basic understanding of science. These things have an impact. They have an impact. And if you're not being supported in the household and you're not necessarily being supported in schools, and again, especially for Black boys, you're talking about classrooms that are over 90% female led. If the idea that boys are not seen as potential leaders, academically capable, so on and so forth, and especially in the environments where they spend more time than not, it's going to have a direct impact on their ability to function in society. What's up, Micah? Hope you're well. All right. So let's get back into it. See what else he's talking about in this. All right. So he says, yes, men have long had societal advantages over women and in some ways continue to be treated favorably. But male achievement alongside that of women is a condition for a healthy society. And male failure begets male failure to society's detriment. Our media, institutions, and public leadership have failed to address this crisis, framing boys and men as the problem themselves rather than as people requiring help. I definitely agree with that. Although I do think he overgeneralizes this idea of male advantage, especially in the Black community. It is a basic assumption that we make, as influenced by feminist critiques going back several decades. The idea being that somehow all men enjoy privilege simply because they have something hanging between their legs. And that is definitely a fabrication. And it is a gross assumption. They don't qualify for the differences in men's status in society. Right. So that being said, I have problems with the beginning of that paragraph, but the end, I wholeheartedly agree. He continues, this needs to change. Helping boys and men succeed should be a priority for all our society's institutions. Schools that have succeeded in keeping boys on track should be expanded by both increasing the number of students they serve and exporting their methods to other schools. Vocational education and opportunities should be redoubled. The nation's public school system should start the process for early age groups, and apprenticeship programs should be supported by the federal government. Nonprofits helping boys and men, such as Big Brothers, Big Sisters of America, and the YMCA, should receive more investment. Well, I would also say when it comes to Black children, Black kids, Black boys, I should say more particularly, we definitely need to see more Black male teachers. But that's going to require a greater investment institutionally in not only paying them to make sure that they can actually compete in society, but also that we take into account what tends to send Black male teachers out. We've been talking about this for years, and I myself have served as a teacher. I've taught at every level, not every grade, but every level. I've taught elementary school, middle school, high school, and college. And I can tell you, one of the things that tends to send Black males out of the teaching profession is not just the low pay. I mean, many of us come into it knowing that there's relatively low pay. Even as a professor, I'm not about to be buying mansions with the income you get as a professor at a teaching university, but the extent to which, especially K through 12, Black men tend to find themselves in a position where as soon as they're hired, they're put in a classroom and given the most difficult kids, especially when they haven't even had any training yet. They're treated as muscle. That's been my experience over and over again, and countless, I won't say countless, but scores of Black men that I've talked to in the last 25, 30 years about teaching have attested to the same thing when they are as black men. The assumption, of course, being that, as black men, we tend to be hyper masculine and so on and so forth. And what we tend to end up dealing with is coming into a classroom environment, having most of the teachers, especially the female teachers, handing over their most difficult male students, and they throw them all in your room. And you may be a new teacher with no training whatsoever. But the other thing that makes it difficult, because I've seen brothers manage that even and start to make some headway. And when they propose programs that may be, that can help them kind of, engage even further, they're cut off at their knees. They're not able to do it. They often are administered over by, let's put it this way, non-black males, right? And told that their job is basically to keep these kids quiet, get them out, get them, push them past the finish line, and just make sure they're out of the way. They don't cause any trouble. They're out of the way. They're quiet. And if you're able to do that with the roughest, toughest, most disorderly kids in the school, that's all that's needed. And if you have ideas as to how you can actually help those kids and get them to go further, you'll find that you're constantly at odds. And some of this is, in terms of budget, some of this is monetary, but a lot of it comes down to what many black males have reported, in private conversation to me, to be a power trip, a power trip in the sense that they as black men are not allowed to serve in a leadership capacity. They're not allowed to take initiative. They're not allowed to kind of have that kind of support, because the idea is they need to shut up and do what they're told. And far too often am I hearing this about young black male teachers grappling with black female administrators. I'll just put it on the table. Consistent problem. Yeah, Greg, appreciate that support. Yeah, it's one of the things that tends to happen. So that being said, black men in the teaching profession, especially again K through 12, get cut off at the knee and check out. Stress level, tends to get high. Very little support, and given the most challenging students with no training on top of it all, and they change professions. Right? So if you're gonna bring in more black male teachers, which I think is a necessity, then you're gonna actually have to support them. And I'm in agreement with the idea that there needs to be more black male schools. But as I've talked about before, especially when you look at cities like Detroit and Chicago and other places, when those schools were, when they attempted to build those schools, when they attempted to put those schools together, the first people to complain were the mothers, who argued that their daughters were being left behind. Right? But again, we're talking about a demographic that's the most enrolled demographic in the country across race and class, black women. So how would actually targeting the boys who are struggling and living in the same households, how would that be a disadvantage for girls who are the highest enrolled when it comes to higher education? It's not a logical argument. But just as we've seen with the Tina Knowles documentary, the mere assumption that there need be attention paid to boys is the problem as far as many of these people are concerned. It is the problem. How dare you apply that attention to them, even if they need it? It's a ridiculous way of actually perceiving the problem, but this is what a lot of the resistance looks like. Kind of like, well, anyway. So let me continue here. He says resources that keep families together when they want to stay together, such as marriage counseling, should be subsidized by the government, a much more cost-efficient approach than dealing with the downstream effects. Right? The enhanced child tax credit should be renewed, helping stabilize families. Drives for national service and contributions, such as the American Exchange Program or national service years, should be resuscitated. And businesses and industries that employ large numbers of men, such as manufacturing, should be invested in and revigorated. Well, as long as you can account for international competition, I don't mind the idea. Can you make it happen? Interesting to see. Right? But this interesting idea, the American Exchange Program, I've seen similar programs actually do wonders. Because many black boys grow up in environments where they don't ever get to leave. And I think seeing other environments at a young age can be extremely helpful, provided that those boys are supported and they're not left out there. taken to other areas, left to their own devices, and then punished when they're trying to survive in environments without support. As long as that's not happening, that can be a very useful experience. To continue, on a cultural level, we must stop defining masculinity as necessarily toxic and start promoting positive masculinity. Strong, healthy, fulfilled men are more likely to treat women well. I get what he's saying. You know, he's somewhat challenging this toxic masculinity idea, pushing back on it a little bit, and suggesting the promotion of positive masculinity. But this is a splitting of hairs maybe, but I would be a little more full throated about this. It's not a matter to me of creating positive masculinity, as I do with the Sacred Black Masculine series in my weekly live. It's more a matter of acknowledging that it already exists. See, the problem with toxic masculinity as an idea, or hegemonic masculinity, is that the way it's engaged in popular parlance, right, is that that is the default mode of masculinity for men, period. And so when you create a positive masculinity with the idea that toxic or hegemonic masculinity is the default, then you're basically trying to say, well, we're going to create something new and positive against an ocean of endless toxicity. And that is absolute bullshit. Absolute. You don't have to create positive masculinity. All you have to do is recognize it. Men who go to work every day taking care of people that never say thank you, right? Men who sacrifice, men who teach, men who go above and beyond, men who work crazy hours just to make sure everybody else around them is, these kind of things happen all the time. And there's a number of different examples. That's just a couple off the head. But if you don't even know, or if you refuse to push the argument that men can be positive, you're going to be oblivious to it, even when it's all around you. What's up, Donnie? Rick, appreciate that support. Thank you. Extended Clips, good to see you, man. Yeah. So, we have to be very careful that these ideas about masculinity are we go through them with a fine-tooth comb, right? Let me see. The above is, of course, a prodigious undertaking, but I see the need around me all the time. A number of my friends have become detached from society. Everyone hits a snag at some point, losing a job, facing a divorce, but my male friends seem less able to bounce back. Male dysfunction tends to take on an air of nihilism and dropping out. As a society, we don't provide many avenues for healthy recovery. Now, this is interesting. He makes this statement, right, where he says, the above, of course, a prodigious undertaking, meaning the creation of positive masculinity, but I see the need around me all the time. So he's framing what he's about to say next as negative and in need of positivity, and that positive gesture is going to be difficult. And his examples, see, it would have been one thing if he said, I've seen people, knocking over liquor stores, stabbing people, whatever. He instead points to men who have lost employment, who have faced a divorce, and punished them for having an air of nihilism. Okay, let's take the divorce, right? We know the majority of divorces are initiated by women, right? We know that family courts tend to side with women. We know that even lawyers will advise women to use manipulative tactics like false molestation charges to get custody. Am I saying that happens in every case? Absolutely not. But overall, we tend to know that family court does not operate to the benefit of men. And so when a man goes through that and grapples with depression, knowing full well that the trope on suicide is that females attempt it in much higher numbers, males accomplish it in much higher numbers. And that's the reason for that is because we experience the brunt of these issues head on. You lose your kids after, hell, I just had a brother today tell me about, and this was just today, had nothing to do with the show right now. I didn't even think about it to this moment. He wrote me this morning. We were having a conversation. And he said, yo, my ex just took my kids out of state against the court's designation, against the court's ruling. I don't know where she is. She's trying to save up money to try and deal with it. Don't know where she is. How hard do you think anybody is working to find them other than him? At least if you talk about fathers taking their kids out of state without permission, there's an air of that's negative, that's a problem, we need to get them. When mothers do it, we live in a society that, presupposes that mothers are inherently better parents because they have breasts. So when a mother takes her kids, you're usually asked out. So Yang here is saying that men who are in those situations are in need of positive masculinity because the air of nihilism and dropping out. Well, that's because individual men are faced against an institutional structure in our culture here in the West that presupposes that they don't need help. And that in and of itself is ridiculous. Yeah. This is what it is. What's up, Todd? Hope you're well. So let me see here. So I think in that respect, he's punishing the very men that he's claiming to help by casting what he calls nihilism against the need for positive masculinity, just so thus suggesting that depression or nihilism is negative. It's not negative. It's a response. It's a response to an environmental set of conditions that places men at a default bottom position when contention arises. Whether you're talking about divorce, whether you're talking, whatever these components are, unemployment. See, we've just had in this last year a whole slew of papers and articles out and news reports about how we're dealing with the she session in this economy. Men have been virtually ignored, even though their numbers have been worse even before the pandemic, and Black men the worst off. Outside of incarceration, there's very little conversation, or police homicide. But again, that's 1 or 2 out of 200 to 300 per year that are discussed. So it's not like, anyway. I think in and of itself, I think what he's trying to raise here is important, especially about the status of boys. I do agree with that. I'm making qualifications for Black boys because he doesn't specify race here. And I'm not one to talk about males generically. I deal with Black males because I know when pieces like this are written, a lot of the nuance on Black male life gets left on the cutting room floor. I can't allow that to happen, even though I advocate for men and boys. All right, Mr. Blue Collar, what's up, man? Appreciate the support. Good to see you. All right. So he says, here's the simple truth I've heard from many men. We need to be needed. We imagine ourselves as builders, soldiers, workers, brothers, part of something bigger than ourselves. We deal with idleness terribly. We do deal with idleness terribly, but I do think he's patronizing here. This is a bit of patronizing. We need to be needed. We imagine ourselves. Stop that shit. Stop it. Don't disrespect men. Don't play down what's going on in their lives. When you actually disinvest from men, society falls apart. Characterizing that as just needing to be needed is patronizing at best. A man with no means of filling up time, George Orwell wrote, is as miserable out of work as a dog on the chain. Left to our own devices, many of us will fail. And from our failure, terrible things result for the country well beyond any individual self-destruction. Wouldn't have been my pick for a closing sentence, but I'll say this much. Men may find themselves to be as miserable out of work as a dog on the chain, but I think the beginning point to addressing men's issues is to stop treating them anything like dogs. I think men are the silent background that are expected to provide the platform that others stand on, shouting how well they've done and how well they've done it by themselves. But they rely on a daily basis on the men around them to do this. I think men on a variety of levels have begun to withdraw from this, and they're tired. And the youngest generations are jumping into this with both feet. And the funny thing about it is the more I hear men talking about it, the more resistance I see from other groups to even hear what men have to say. I can't tell you how many women I have, or feminists in particular, that come into my comments on Facebook or YouTube, or email me privately just to tell me in various ways, right, very creative ways at times, how everything you guys are talking about is unnecessary because you're not bright enough to understand what the issues are. The issues are not what you think they are. The issues are just it's just capitalism. The issue is just you need a job, or the issue is you just need some sex. These real dismissive kind of statements, as if men, and black men at that, can't articulate what the fuck they need to and identify the problems that they grapple with. They're incapable of doing so. So you need somebody to come in and tell you what you should be thinking about. That ain't the most patronizing and arrogant shit. You got brothers in this space and we're in and out of my videos. We're having these conversations that are everything from, working in the liquor store to, surgeons across the board, class wise, occupationally, educationally, across the board. Brilliant cats on a variety of different levels that'll hit you with ideas and truth that you just don't see coming. And all of that gets flushed down the toilet by somebody who wants to glibly come in and tell you you don't even know what the issues are that have affected you your entire life. The arrogance of some of these people come in and give you lectures about shit you get wrong and ain't even bothered to watch a video that you made. I had a back and forth with a woman in one of my comments earlier today, or at least I think it was a woman. You never know on social media, but she's coming in before. We'll talk all kinds of shit, write essays worth of stuff about what I need to get right. And then when I say, well, have you watched it? Did you watch the video? Crickets. Fellas, do not do any of the emotional labor these people require of you, especially if they don't even have the basic decency to listen to what you've said before they choose to disagree with it. Ain't that some shit? But that's been happening for years to a lot of us. And I think brothers have just grown very tired of it. So I unapologetically talk to other black men. If you have something to offer, if you can demonstrate that you have a care for black men, you got my attention. I can respect that. Across race and across gender and across sexual orientation. If you have a sincere care for men, boys, and black men and boys, we're good. We can have a discussion, we can disagree, but if I know that there's a base level concern for the humanity of black men and boys, I can work with you. But if the only reason you come in this space is to dismiss what black men and boys are talking about for your own egoic purposes, don't even bother. Don't even bother. So anyway, just wanted to hit you with a little bit that little piece. I thought this article by Yang was interesting. I think it misses a couple of things, but overall, I think he's right in his concern. I think boys and thus men are not all right, and they are ignored. The problem with that is that the more you choose to ignore it, the worse it gets, the more you're going to regret it as a society. It's like setting a bridge on fire while you're standing on it. But it is what it is. Anyway, you guys have a good night. I appreciate the support. Again, like, share, subscribe, join, and donate. Support the channel so we can continue to do this. And I will see you guys